Thank you so much for that, Sue Jane. That was really fantastic, very interesting. I think we have a couple of questions. I have a question as well, and we have a few minutes, and I'll hand over to Emma to moderate those.
Hello, hi. We've got a first question from Samuel Shaw. He says, thanks for the wonderful talk, Sue. You used a mixture of clinical and romantic language when describing your practice, talk of making records and being a fly on the wall on one hand, and talking of experiencing excitement and drama on the other. Can you speak further to this tension? Do you ever feel yourself carried away by the drama, or do you maintain distance from your subject, or is it about trying to balance the two?
It's very difficult. Well, spanning perhaps 35 to 40 years of recording this industry. Certainly when I was young, I was very much caught up by this incredible surreal world. But as I've grown older, I've gone a bit perhaps more reflective, as we all have, on this fossil fuel industry. But that makes me, in a way, more fascinated by it in order to, as an artist, to be there speaking to the people firsthand who are involved in it. I hope that gives a little bit of description.
Thank you. Matthew, did you want to ask your question?
Yes. You mentioned earlier in your talk, Sue Jane, that you were discovering for the first time a history that you'd never been taught in school.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering if perhaps a lot of industrial art in Scotland is perhaps an attempt by people to reclaim or relearn this massive industrial history, which for most people, stick excluded, of course, doesn't constitute the kings and queens style of history that we're all taught. It's sort of like a reclaiming it for yourself.
Yes, well, I think it's the way it's been taught too. It's in some ways because the oil companies dominate this industry, so it's taught in a very economical sort of corporate way. It's got, you know, there's people who work in that industry, and so it could be told, and it's much more doing that now. Museums, certainly Aberdeen Maritime Museum, yourselves, are doing that much more. It's voice of the worker, but for many years the worker's voice was ignored, and so I think doing it through the people who work in this industry certainly helps. You know, I mean, you get all that with the shipyards, all the shipyard workers, and all the documentation there. So education, I would say, to look at it differently. And also it's a contemporary industry. People are nostalgic. They always look back at what has been before and not what's happening now. And I think artists are very good at pinpointing that, no matter what it is, whether it's industry or what subject. But I think the creative process really helps, you know, in pinpointing. Do we see differently? We see differently from economists and, you know, other people. So that's why it's important to be part of. But I'm a great advocate of instead of STEM, we must have STEAM, involve the arts there, not just the science and technology and maths. Arts are so crucial.
Perfect, thank you. Emma?
And we had one final quick question from Patrick, one of our other speakers.
Yes.
Did you visit the building wharf of the oil platform in Belgium?
No, I didn't. No. I would have loved to. It would have been exciting to do that. But again, it's so complex to be allowed permission to these things. I'm just grateful I can get into NIG. Yeah.
I think we've got another couple of minutes. There's another couple of questions from Matilda Vaughan. Thank you, Sue. Great talk. How does speaking with workers help your artistic practice beside portraiture?
Well, they see things differently from me. So it's very good when I'm drawing someone, an individual. It's good to get their story. So it really does help my image when I'm working on it. Also, you know, people who work offshore, there's all sorts of people, not just there's photographers or people who are artists, you know, so it's a huge sort of cosmopolitan society out there. People from all over the world work in that confined space of being on an installation. So it's a fascinating thing.
From Jenna, thank you so much for your talk, Sue. That was fascinating. I remember coming across the paper you mentioned in terms of Murchison flare equipment and wondering if these items of heavy industry are currently displayed in a museum or if there are plans to display them anywhere.
Well, yes, perhaps STIC members could answer that. I think Ellie is a member, so maybe she could answer that later. I would love to see it in the Grand Hall of National Museum of Scotland, the flare tip. But maybe one day. Maybe one day. It is on display at Granton display area there. So
okay.
Aberdeen Maritime Museum, I think they're trying to include it in their exhibition space, but due to COVID, I think there's delay with that.
I think Ellie is with us, so she might be able to answer the question.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
A question from Elsa Cox. Hello from Orkney. Do you ever find yourself having to validate your practice in relation to the North Sea oil industry, whether to the industry itself or to other audiences?
Yeah, well, it's always, hi Elsa. It's always a problem. Well, it's not a problem, but it's a challenge being an artist. Suddenly landing on, for example, an offshore installation, and people who perhaps never met an artist before, and have this preconception of this kind of wacky individual, or and they realize that I'm just the same as they are, but also that I'm also very interested in what they do, and that's a kind of strange concept. If I have an artist wants to record their life, their working environment, and it's something which they are not used to. So on the other hand, working with trying to convince oil companies to get onto their sites, offshore or whatever, it's quite complex. And I've been very lucky throughout the years. I've had individuals who, mainly women actually, have worked in this industry at top levels, who could understand what I was getting at, names such as Jacqueline Craw and Carol Barboni, and actually Elsa Cox herself, who was at National Museum Scotland. So,
thank you. Just a couple of other quick ones. Colin Sanderson, the Art Science Library Edinburgh, said, fascinating and congratulations, reminded me of Paul Hogarth's work for the oil industry. Shall look at my notes. I recall a Shell exhibition in Aberdeen. And a quick message from Ellie at NMS saying the flare tip is in the collection of National Museum Scotland, and it can be viewed, as you said, in the collection centre in Granton on tours, though sadly they are suspended at the moment due to COVID. We'd love to display it in the Museum of Scotland in Edinburgh. But it's a very difficult object to display for various reasons. I think we can probably all appreciate that.
Yeah.
So she did say that they are in constant talks about the possibilities. Some of the smaller items that NMS collected in collaboration with you, Sue Jane, are on display at the Museum of Scotland. So thanks, Ellie, for that. That's really useful. One more from Andy Marland. Great job of capturing the scale of engineering. I agree with that, yes. He said he'd photographed the Brent Delta and Brent Bravo being demolished in Hartlepool and was blown away by the size of the rigs. Definitely worth visiting if you get the opportunity. It is, I mean, I drive through Dundee on a regular basis and see all sorts of things, and it's just absolutely incredible.
I don't think you can see it very well because it's quite pixelated, and also there's a reflection of the glass. But this image is actually off Brent Delta down in Hartlepool. When I managed to get in. I can't, say everything in the talk, but I managed to get in. The Shell had a farewell to Brent Delta week, so I managed to get in, and I was there for the day of people who used to work on Brent Delta from a whole range of its 40 years. I met, some people in their 80s who worked on the Brent, and it was just extraordinary. We were allowed up on the top side as well, and so it was very weird being allowed walking around the platform set in the landscape of Hartlepool, this industrial scene on land, and it's, I don't know if you can see very well, but it's got elephant feet from where where they pulled it in, from the three legs, which used to be, of course, Brent's is very contentious at the moment, but it's always been in the news about Greenpeace and about all the rest of it. But I think it's quite a sight for people in northeast England to see. There's also Brent Alpha in at the moment. Brent Bravo was there a year before. So that whole area of northeast England can see these massive alien beasts being dismantled at the AWK yard in Hartlepool. It's quite a sight. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sue Jane. I think that wraps up our
Yeah.
questions. I'll hand back over to Matthew. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Sue Jane. That was a fantastic talk, really setting the mood, I hope, for the rest of the day, and some really excellent questions as well. It's nice to see good engagement with the topic. I'm also really pleased that something that has been traditionally seen as purely functionary and not really thought about aesthetically over the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years has really sort of, it's almost come into an art genre of its own, and I'm really pleased to see that. And yes, thank you for taking time out and all the way from way up north where your internet connection has been faultless throughout the day. I just apologise for the delays that ended up being at my end, so sorry about that, but thank you very much, Sue Jane. Thank you.